Good evening, everyone, and welcome to this week's Agile London. Thank you, firstly, to everyone for joining. Great to see so many returning faces and some new ones as well. I do say every single week, please do remain on mute throughout the session. And if you do have any questions, which I really do encourage, please just fire them over to me privately in the chat at the bottom of your screen, and I will ask them to Tobias at the end. I did mention to people last week my massive news that I was getting a puppy last Thursday. Bit of an update on that. She's amazing. She is very lovable, chews absolutely everything, and turns out she hates walking. So I sort of have to gently drag her around 50 yards on a lead, and then we go home and play again in the kitchen for treats and all sorts of cuddles. So that is the update on the dog. So really looking forward to this one this week. We've got Tobias Mayer. Tobias has spoken with us a couple of times before, and we consistently get great feedback on his talks, and he really has a knack to get the brain juices flowing. So, and you know, even for myself, who only work within the agile space from a recruitment perspective, I always come away with some great takeaway thoughts. So Tobias Mayer, he is educator, facilitator, and author of The People Scrum, which was actually out on audiobook this year. So that's well worth checking out. His talk this evening is, well, his metaphor is visual dialogue. So I'm going to now hand over to Tobias, who will take the full 40 minutes of this session. So really looking forward to this one. Tobias, over to you.
Thanks, Alex. Hi, everyone. Lots of familiar faces here, which is nice. So I'm just clicking the thing to look up, to remind myself what I'm talking about. Metaphor. So some of us would have been familiar with the Extreme Programming book when it came out. When was that? 1999, I think, 2000 maybe. I think it was 99. And metaphor was one of the principles of doing extreme programming well. And but it didn't really get any traction. You know, a lot of the things around XP that we talk about today, things like test-driven development and pair programming, continuous integration, all that stuff gets a lot of airtime. But metaphor sort of fell by the way a little bit. But I've always been quite fascinated with it. I think it's when we're writing code, most people who write code do have to think in metaphors, because we're thinking about what the class that we're writing or what the function we're writing represents, and there's some metaphorical connection we make. We name things in, the old way of writing code was to name variables like X and Y, or A and B and stuff like that. But in the last few decades, people have been coming up with much more descriptive names. But of course, these are all metaphors, aren't they? Because they're not those actual things. They are representative of those things. They feel like those things, if you like. And so when Extreme Programming book was written, and they talk about metaphor, and of course, yeah, metaphor is an important part, because this is how we think about what we do. Because we're working in such abstractions. We're working with literally with bits and bytes inside a computer, with ones and zeros, instruction sets that we have to give them meaning. We give them meaning through the language that we impose on top of this, whether it's Java or C++ or some other language. We're imposing a language on top, and within the language, then we impose naming. We have naming conventions in that, so we start to name things. And so it's all metaphorical. It's like writing poetry. Writing code is like writing poetry, and the best code can almost be read like a poem. It describes what's happening in the system. And so that was the thing that attracted me to writing code. When I first discovered what writing code meant, and it wasn't just like coding ones and zeros, which I always thought it was. And I realized it was like this way of doing. I would write code and I would print it out and I'd hang it on the wall. Seriously, I would. Because I like the look of it. I like the structure of it, and I liked going up to it and reading like the naming and knowing what it did. So there's a lot of connection with poetry. So, and of course, poetry is rife with metaphor. That is what poetry is. It's helping us to see the world in a different way. That's the power of metaphor. It gets us to open our eyes and to look differently than we otherwise have been trained to do. So we're moving away from literalism. And you know, this has been true ever since language was invented. Probably people would use descriptive words to help us understand things, and the more sophisticated the language became, the more likely this was to happen. So we speak in metaphors all the time. If we look back at, you know, something like Aesop's fables, which were written, I don't even know, you know, pre-Roman, I think he was Greek, you know, this is a few thousand years ago. Most of Aesop's fables are about animals, but they're not about animals, they're about people. And each person is represented by an animal in there. So there's a metaphorical representation, like someone's like saying this person is like a fox, or this person is like an ass. And they probably had the same meaning back then that they do today. But rather than, you know, because they're written, a lot of Aesop's fables apparently were written about actual people, about actual politicians, in fact, most of them. So he was the first sort of, perhaps one of the earliest cartoonists, but he was doing it with words rather than pictures, political cartoonist. So he was ridiculing perhaps some of those politicians by casting them into these animal characters. So using metaphor, essentially, poetry using metaphor. There's a famous line I want to read out, you're probably familiar with, let's see if I remember it. But hark, what light from yonder window breaks? It is the east, and Juliet is the sun. It's probably familiar to many of you, right? From Romeo and Juliet. Riddled with metaphor again, right? There's no sun. It's the middle of the night, in fact, when Romeo goes to Juliet's window. But he's describing her as something else. He's describing her entrance onto the balcony as the dawn, and herself as the sun shining. And then it goes on to something like, arise, fair sun, and kill the envious moon. So he's got a previous love, who is he's describing as the moon. So she becomes the moon, and the sun rises up and drowns out the dimness of the moon. So it's just, this whole thing is metaphorical. Now, if it was written more like this, Romeo comes in and sees it and goes, oh, look, there's a woman on the balcony coming out, and I fancy her more than I fancy the other woman I fancied last week. Wouldn't have quite the same ring, would it? It just wouldn't quite do it. And so we've elevated all of it. We've elevated the speaker into a poet. We've elevated the woman into the sun. So how great of that can that be? And so we get the impression in very few words that this is a stunning moment in Romeo's life. You know, this is like a wake up into this beauty, into this love that's going to actually last him his lifetime, which turns out to be very short, but nonetheless, it does. So power of metaphor. Now, what I want to talk about is something a bit more pedestrian than that, though. Let's take it down a few pegs and talk about the corporate world. When we do a breakout in a minute, by the way, you're going to have to take your mics. You're going to have to turn your unmute yourself, because you're going to need to have some conversations about this. We use metaphor all the time in our workplaces. We talk about war rooms. That's one that we use a lot. We say that we have to create a war room for this, or we say we're in firefighting mode, right? I've never actually worked in an organization where there has been an actual fire burning in the corridor, right? It's obviously a metaphor. It's a metaphor. What does it mean? It means that there's a problem. There's a big problem. There's a major problem. We all have to drop everything else that we're doing and go and deal with this major problem. So, you know, it's one that comes up again. And it's interesting, isn't it? Because the metaphors we use really do describe the state that we are often finding ourselves in. So a company that is always screaming about firefighting is probably a company most of us wouldn't really want to work at. We kind of avoid that sort of company because it tells you something about the culture. Companies that, you know, talk about fighting the competition and having war rooms and stuff like that, that's also brings up a certain way of being that that perhaps isn't that compatible with the kind of work that many Agilists want to do. So, peace rooms, someone's put in there, Srikant, yeah, make peace rooms. Or simply team rooms, describe it for what it is. Metaphors are useful though. I mean, I think when that metaphor was first put together, it was probably quite useful because we had an idea of what a team room. I mean, a war room was like where everyone came together to strategize and to figure things out and solve a problem quickly with all the best minds. So it does mean that, but over time it gets worn out and it gets used without thought. We're not, we just call everything a war room suddenly. Every time we get together, it's like a summit used to be like the very pinnacle of something, the very top. So when you had a meeting that was a summit, it was the most important meeting. It was one of a kind. You had it once every, 50 years maybe. But suddenly every meeting that important people go to is called a summit. They have summits like daily now around the world. They've got the summit for this and the summit for that. And so the metaphor breaks down and it has no value anymore. It doesn't tell us anything. It just becomes synonymous with meeting. So we're having a meeting. You might as well just say meeting. So I'll give you a few examples that I was checking out today. Overused cliches in the business world. I'll give you a couple, and then I want you to go and think about them yourself. Think outside the box, of course, is a great one, isn't it? That might have meant something at one time, but when people use it now, we have to think outside the box. They give away the fact that they spend most of their time inside a box, thinking inside walls. They don't act there in order to, like, we have to think outside the box. Tells me that you don't do that. That's not what you do if you're telling me you have to do it. So it has the opposite effect of what people are actually seeking. Push the envelope. That's a strange one, isn't it? Push the envelope. But we use that all the time. We have to push the envelope. I think it means like, let's advance ourselves a bit more. Let's do something daring. I heard a joke about that, actually. I'll tell you the joke. It's a pun. It says, no matter how far you push the envelope, it always remains stationary. Think about that one out. Anyway. Puns are very language specific, aren't they? It's you have to know English reasonably well. But yeah, we throw these phrases around and there's loads of them, but without looking them up. I want you to just go into rooms of 4 briefly. Let's take a 5-minute breakout, Alex, if you're there. Are you there, Alex? Alex?
Yeah, I'm here.
Go there. We're going to do breakout rooms, 5-minute breakout rooms. I want you to come up with as many corporate metaphors as you can. The things that we say. Basically, let's look at the structure of a metaphor. Aristotle came up with this, a mathematical formula for a metaphor. X equals Y. That's it, as simple as that. X equals Y. So you use one thing to mean something completely different, like Juliet equals sun, right? That's X equals Y. Or Elvis Presley comes out with metaphors all the time in his songs. I've got one written down here somewhere. She's like a volcano. She's my buttercup. I'm in love. I'm all shook up. That's an interesting one. So I'm in love equals shaken. Right. So X is in love and Y equals shaken. They mean the same thing. So I'm shaken up means I'm in love. Right. So we can substitute these. So we do this in the workplace. So a war room equals a meeting room where teams go. Right, that's the equivalent. So X equals Y. So come up with recall a few from your own experience about metaphors that are used in the workplace. If English is not your first language and you're speaking a different language, you might be able to translate some of these, or you might be able to explain the ones from your own tongue and how they might map into ones for us. Because most metaphors have certainly some cultural context and sometimes linguistic context as well. Anyway, just have a chat about that. So let's just do rooms of 4, Alex, for 5 minutes.
All right. Rooms of 4 people?
Yeah.
Okay, so should I open? Yeah, I'll do 3 rooms. Open all rooms. Are people able to join now?
You can just put people in, can't you, I think?
Do I put people in?
You just random shuffle rooms of 4. Quick conversation.
It's actually not. I'm not sure how I can add people randomly, so I'm just having to do it manually.
Oh, if you just say create rooms automatically, it just puts people in some room.
Okay. Let me try that again. One moment.
If you make me the co-host, I could do it maybe. Sorry about this. Emmy, I just noticed you there. Hello.
Tobias, you're
hi. Yeah, I was a bit late.
Yeah, hi.
Sorry, Emmy.
Right. Okay, so people have to click to join it, Alex, right?
Just looking that way, yeah. I'm your host now, so I can't. I don't have visibility of the breakout rooms at the bottom.
Oh. You've made 2 breakout rooms by the look of it.
Yeah, I think you can add more.
I can't add anyone. I can't. There's nothing I can do on this.
Do you want to give me it back and I'll try it? Give me host back.
How do I do that? How do I do that?
I think maybe click on the 3 dots next to my name or where it says mute and put maybe make host.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. Breakout rooms in progress. Room 1, room 2, room 3. Okay.
Well, you've done this before.
Do you know what? We have done breakout rooms before, but this seems to be slightly different. I'm wondering if there's an update. And now I can't add people to add others to this.
All right, let's change. Let's do a different tactic. What I'll do is type some things in the chat window. Let's just do that for now. Well, you can try and figure this out in the background, Alex, maybe about how you're going to set them up. Let's just put some metaphors that we use in the corporate world in the chat window to everyone. Low-hanging fruit, nice one, yeah, that kind of thing. Just throw a few more out there like that. But Miljan, do you actually say that? The shithead's coming. Begins mine, release train.
I haven't said it myself, but I've heard that one.
Yeah. Oh, chicken and pigs. It's a horrible one, isn't it? Release train. Let's look at that one. That's quite a recent one, I think. Well, that's maybe not actually. Release train. They use it in SAFe, as we know, but it's older than that. It goes back before that. When you hear that, what is that describing? Release train.
All right, we're being invited. Should we join?
I don't know. No, let's just stay here for now.
Do you want me to close all rooms?
Yeah, close all rooms for a minute. You figured out how to do it though, right? So we can do it.
Next time we will absolutely smash it.
I love it.
They're going to close in 50 seconds, so you'll get people back shortly.
Yeah.
Apologies.
So, Tobias, would you then say, as we're doing this, that metaphors are about showing, not telling? Because as you were talking about poetry, as you were talking about writing, I was thinking, like, a lot of times, at least when I'm writing, I'm trying to show rather than tell. And the example that you earlier on gave of explaining reminded me of that. So.
That's interesting. It wasn't where I'm particularly going with this, but I think you're onto something. That it is. It's much more interesting to show rather than tell, and to lead through that. Metaphors can lead us. The metaphors we use can lead us in particular directions, and so sometimes they're chosen deliberately to do that. Other times they're used mindlessly. just because we've heard these phrases. You know, we've all got to be on. You all got to be on board. You know, everyone's got to be on the same boat. We all got to be flying on the same airplane, going in the same direction. And sometimes we just, you know, really think these through. But they're just what we say. But the thing that I want to pick out from this list of things that are coming in there, the release train. Let's look at the release train thing for a minute, because what that is telling us is that the process we're using is a mechanical one. That's what I hear from that. And I think that's what the metaphor describes. Trains are mechanical things. They are controlled centrally. They're centrally controlled, right? There's no self-organization on a train system. In fact, a colleague of mine uses a rail network as a comparison to a road network as a difference between a defined system and a self-organizing system. So a road system is a self-organizing system. Drivers make their own decisions about what they're going to do and when they're going to do it and how they're going to do it. And they work with they get feedback from the surrounding area, from other drivers and stuff like that, but they make the decisions. Trains don't do that. Trains can't do that. Trains can't be self-organized. They can't choose their route. They're fixed, and someone has got central control over that. So when we start using metaphors in our workplace, in an agile workplace, from a rail network basis, we are essentially saying we have, as individuals, we have no control. The control is centralized, is outside of our control. It's hierarchical, it's centralized, and all the best we can do is just jump on board. I don't know about you, but from my perspective, that's not what Agile is. Agile is not that. It might be many things, but it's not that. It's not about a mechanical way of working. So we use this metaphor. Has it been introduced into the world of work blindly, or was it very useful at one point in time? I think it was, because I think when it was first introduced, processes that used that metaphor were top down. They were waterfall type methods. They were defined. You know, everything had a place, and you got on the right train, you got to where you wanted to go. But we don't work in that way anymore. So we need new metaphors. We have to find new metaphors. Otherwise, people get caught up it's all unconscious. A lot of this is really unconscious. We get caught up in an old way of thinking about, you know, this thinking about trains and mechanical systems and stuff like that. So we have to challenge these metaphors, which is why when we start calling them out, and Miljan, you put another one there that's interesting. You must defend your territory to be on the winning side. And that ties in nicely with the war room metaphor, doesn't it? Defending your territory, but there are war metaphors. So it indicates that there's a fight going on, there's a battle going on. Now, there might be something healthy about external competition, you know, trying to do better than our competitors. Perhaps, you know, Frederick Laloux in his Reinventing Organizations might say otherwise, and many people would also. But there might be some value in that. But what happens with the competitive warlike mindset is it becomes internalized, right? We bring it into the organization, and then we have competition with each other. You know, I couldn't count on my two hands the amount of times people have used the word fiefdom as a metaphor to describe management and silos. People have fiefdoms. Particular directors or executives have their own group of people, the ones who report to them, and they're going to hold that above all. They're going to hold that as valuable above all else, above interaction, above collaboration. So
another thing that's interesting, if I may, Tobias, and I don't know if you're looking for people to jump in and share thoughts, or
I'm happy for you to do that. Please do. Yeah.
Like a lot of times, especially with war, it's like me against you, right? It doesn't have that type of feeling of like, you know, we're on the same side, or that we're co-creating something. So I think that's another thing with these type of metaphors, where they emphasize, you know, one versus another.
Yeah. I don't know, but I mean, look at another one there. I just noticed building bridges, Emmy. That sounds positive, doesn't it? To build bridges, to connect
That
people.
one is, yeah.
Yeah, definitely.
It's also interesting. It kind of implies that we have great divides there that we have to build bridges to get over. But perhaps those divides are not there. You know, perhaps all we have to do is take down walls. It might not actually be about building things. It might be removing things. For me, that's always the first step. So when we talk about, so we have this similar conversation when we talk about scaling agile up. You know, it's the opposite way of thinking about that is to how do we scale agile down? You know, scale the organization down rather, so it can be agile. That's a process of removing things. It's like cleaning out. Organizations can sometimes become equivalent to those houses where people hoard things. They never want to get rid of things. And we have all these procedures and processes in place that no one's ever bothered challenging. We just put new processes and procedures on top of that. And we never really get the chance to clean house. And so this idea of knocking things down rather than building more things, for me, is an interesting metaphor. Now, so the question is then, what walls can we take down? Metaphorical walls. They're not actual. We're not actually going to knock down brick walls in the buildings, are we? We're talking about metaphorical walls, like we're talking about metaphorical bridges. Now, if there really is so much damage, sometimes there is a need to build bridges. But I would first of all go to what can we remove rather than what can we build. So when we challenge the point I'm making here is that when you challenge the metaphor, you begin to start exploring in a way that you might not have had the opportunity to do before. You know, so we see a metaphor like let's build bridges. And everyone, it's a kind of metaphor you can get excited about. Yeah, we need to do that. You know, people are disconnected, they're not talking to it, let's build bridges. But then you start thinking about it, and what does building bridges mean? What are we building them over? What's underneath the bridge? When you start asking questions like that, what kind of bridge is it? You know, what's it going from and to, and what's beneath it? And you can start exploring the metaphor of the bridge, and it starts to open up questions that you may not have opened up before. So these metaphors, even though they can be way overused sometimes to the point of where we don't even notice they're metaphors anymore sometimes. Take, for example, the word server. When we talk about servers in computing, that's a metaphor. Someone said, what is this like? Oh, it's like someone bringing you something and giving it to you, like a server in a restaurant. But it's a machine serving us data and information. So they came up with this metaphor of server. And it's not a metaphor anymore. Now it's the thing. It is the thing. It's become the thing. But it was once a metaphor. So when we use metaphors over and over and over again, they become part of the language. They lose their poetry. That's what happens. They lose their poetry. And it's the poetry that changes the way we think about things. And when we lose the poetry, we lose the ability to think differently. So there's loads of good metaphors in the window here. That's the stuff that's coming up. Melting pot. It's an interesting one. I would like. How are we doing with the breakouts, Alex?
I mean, I think I might have it. How many rooms would you like?
I'd like 4 people in each room. So 1, 2, 3, 4. Do 4 rooms. 4 rooms should be good. Try 4 rooms, and you can assign people automatically. Is that the checkbox?
Oh, there we go. Yeah. Okay.
That's what you want to do. But before you do it, what are we doing when we go out to those rooms? So I was going to do a breakout where you start exploring the corporate stuff, but that's not where I'm trying to aim with this here. I just want to give the idea that we're using metaphors all the time in our language, all right? And we stop thinking about it sometimes. But what I want you to do is consciously think about it. So consider, when you're in your breakout room, tell someone what your role is, what your job title is, if you like. And then I want you collectively to think up metaphors for your job. You know, just to give you a quick example, I met a project manager once, and this is not uncommon, you might have heard the same thing, who described herself as a cat herder. Okay, now there are no cats in the corporate world, or very few anyways, and she's not actually herding them, but to her it feels like that. And when she says my job is like a cat herder, we smile and we nod and we kind of like go, oh yeah, I know what that feels like. I feel that as well. So it connects us. These metaphors kind of connect us together. So think about what kind of metaphor you might have for your role. Is it another kind of a job, or is it some imaginary thing like a cat herder, or is it something inanimate? It might be something inanimate, or it might be an animal, or it might be something. Just give some thought to what does it feel like when I'm doing my job. What does it feel like sometimes, and and then you'll find a metaphor, and then we'll come back and share those. So just a 5-minute metaphor exploration for yourself in the context of your job. Alex, do you want to come back on screen? Yeah. So when you set the rooms up, there's some options on there. One is to manually assign people to rooms.
Yeah.
One is to automatically assign people.
Yeah.
And if you click on that, then when you create 4 rooms or something, it will just sort people into those rooms equally.
Yeah. The first time I did manually create instead of automatically assign. So that's where things were going a bit wrong.
And I think there's also a difference between having people click to join the room and being just kind of thrown into the room. It's faster when people are just thrown into the room.
Yeah. I think that's what I did automatically, although maybe they were invited and they had to click to enter. But I did click automatically assign, and it just went boom, like 4 or 5 people into one room.
That's it. Yeah, that's the only one. That's
the
way of doing it. And I think the third option on the newer version of Zoom is got some weird flashing thing. The third option is that people can self-assign. They can choose a room to go to. Right. They've started using it on conference, like for open space and stuff.
Yeah.
You've got a weird flashing red dot next to your name on my screen. Do you see that?
Next to my name?
On the participant list, yeah. Maybe that means you're the host or something.
Maybe it does, yeah. Yeah, I can't see anything.
You know how it's got like the video camera and the mic next to the person's name on the participant list? And next to yours, you've got this little red flashing dot. Never seen that before.
That could mean I'm recording.
Oh, that's what it is, I think. Yeah. Oh, you're recording?
Yeah, okay. I record for our YouTube channel, and I'll send to you if you wish.
So presumably you edit these bits out, right? Because
we don't actually. I just put it up, and if people suggesting I need to. We don't. Yes, we wouldn't actually. But what I'll do is, if you wish, I'll send you the original file that we get sent from Zoom, so you can tweak it and edit it and use it for your own purposes. But we will just upload the whole file onto YouTube, so people can just watch the whole session.
Oh, okay.
So me messing up the breakout rooms will be forever cemented into the Oliver Bernard YouTube history files and never forgotten.
Wait, the breakout rooms, but they're not being recorded in the breakout rooms, are they?
I think probably just, I don't know, maybe us three will be recorded.
Yeah.
It won't record all breakout rooms.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was going to say it would just be this room.
Okay.
The least interesting room, in fact.
I mean, we don't know what's going on in the other rooms, do we? God knows what they could be talking about. I like this room. I'm very comfortable here. This is our safe space. I'm happy here. Although we did lose Heather. Not sure where she's gone.
Was she one of the team, one of your team, Heather?
No, she was a... what I should have done actually is moved people so it was just us three in a room, but I wasn't really sure how. But it is either she's gone into another room or she's buggered off altogether.
Yeah.
But she wants to do a talk. Like, she contacted me earlier from a company called Warricle, and they want to do a talk. So she said, I'll jump on tonight and watch watch how it's done.
Mm-hmm. Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Maybe she got enough.
Yeah. Maybe. She's only she's from the marketing department, not Agile. It's someone else from the Agile team that will be doing the talk on behalf of them. So she'll report back and give her opinion on how well it's gone. How often do you do these talks, Tobias?
When I get asked, I don't know.
Oh, really?
It's been about once a month or something like that, probably since August.
I really want to get you and Jem on a combined one.
And he just wasn't free. He was moving house as well, I think, wasn't he?
Yeah.
Same thing. Yeah, I think maybe next year things will settle down for people. Yeah, I'd like to do something with Jem. Not sure what.
You have a very good sort of collaboration and working relationship with Jem, like so I see.
Well, we did. We haven't really done anything for a couple of years now, actually. We did that 2017, 2018, maybe into very early 2019. We did that gorilla, £800 agile gorilla thing. That he conceived that and was sort of collecting requests for it, and then he invited me to join him in a conversation on that. But that was fun. We did quite a few of those actually, maybe a dozen of those. But then we just got pulled off in different directions. It needed three of us because there was the two people having the conversation. There was Tanner who did all the sound and filming and editing and stuff.
He's a very busy man, Jem.
He is, yeah. And it was hard to get all three of us in the same place at the same time, and in a place where the noise level wasn't too bad. Because some of them, the noise was a little, it was a bit. People complained about sound quality wasn't great, but we improved it over time.
I'm sure.
As you do, right? You get better at these things as you do them.
Indeed.
It was fun to do, and we had some. I think maybe it just kind of lived its natural life. It kind of came. Shouldn't they be back by now? Are they on 5 minutes?
I can close all rooms, and that will bring them back.
How long did you give them?
I didn't give them any. There was no time, no option for time.
Oh, there was. You probably it was probably the default, which is probably like 15 minutes. You should probably bring them back.
Okay, I'll bring them back. Well, it says all breakout rooms will close in 60 seconds.
Oh, well, close them now. Yeah, I bet you've got.
It's not letting me. Hold on, let me see if I can. There you go. It's bringing people back.
Yeah. There's a setting. If you go to next, you can't see it now, but when you recreate the rooms, you'll see a setting that allows you to set the time, and it also allows you to set a countdown at the end. So like when the room expires, you can give them like 15 or 30 seconds to wind their way back.
I think they're on their way back now.
Good. All right. So what kind of metaphors did we hear? Do you want to type something in the chat window that's either your own or someone else's, and do it with the X equals Y thing, project manager equals or software developer equals. Let's see what you got. That's nice.
Bias, you might want to ask everyone, re-request that, because a lot more people have just jumped back in.
People are typing in the chat window there. We're doing the X equals Y formula for your job title equals the metaphor. Aruna, I like that one. That's really interesting. Princess and the Pea reference. Mira, that's one of my favorite ones. The annoying relative who peels back the rug, looks at the dirt under the rug. I like that one. Velcro. Coach equals scaffolding. Srikant, you're going to have to explain that. So the coach equals scaffolding, and if the scaffolding doesn't work, fix the scaffold. but don't make your scaffold permanent. Oh, I see. That's the last bit. That's the bit I was. Don't make your scaffold permanent. Yeah, yeah.
I mean, have to get absorbed into the system, or the system need to absorb the. You're facilitating a way of work and learning, and you want to disappear.
Well, scaffold by nature does disappear, doesn't it? Once the work is done, the scaffold goes away.
In theory, but in a lot of organizations, the scaffold becomes the structure, and that's part of the problem.
That's a problem. Yeah, yeah. There's some interesting ones here, aren't there? So some of these are positive and some are not so positive. Software developer, Adrian, let's talk about this, equals water. Tell us about that one. It's interesting.
I think today's developers need to be more flexible and needs to lay their, let's say, ego and priorities and take care of what's really important.
So you said you said the words they should be or they ought to be or something. Does that mean at the moment many of them are not water?
It's possible, yeah.
What are they if they're not water, would you say? Are they ice?
Stubborn.
I can think of some ice-like developers I've met in my life. Yeah, yeah, the developer like water is really nice. You know, that also brings up that lovely phrase flow, doesn't it? That unpronounceable Czechoslovakian person. How do you pronounce his name? Anyone know that book? Flow. Mihai Csikszentmihalyi. I think that's how you pronounce it. He wrote a book called Flow, and that's what makes me think of it. You say we should be like water. You know, I'm sure that comes from some esoteric spiritual tradition as well, doesn't it? Be like water. But that's nice, yeah. And it's this kind of like going with the flow. It's a nice metaphor for collaboration, I think, that one. It's blending everything in together, blending the stream, all the streams running in together. You don't get that with ice, do you? Ice is unbudgeable, it's stuck there. That's nice, yeah. Yeah, Flow is a good book, yeah. Project manager sometimes feels herself as a bookkeeper. Let's talk about that. Because sometimes when we come up with a metaphor instinctively, they're sometimes really positive and they're sometimes not so much. They're a bit negative. Like it sounds to me, I don't know who said this one, but a project manager sometimes feels as a bookkeeper. That doesn't feel positive. Would that be accurate? Who said that one? Who's got that?
Yes, I am saying that. Although I sometimes feel myself as a maestro, but sometimes, you know, you have to present the status of the project, and you have to keep all the information about the project, you know, as a record, so that you can give the final status of the project. That is something negative. I just not so positive for me, you know. But sometimes it might act as positive as well.
Okay, so it's a bit of both, and it might be one aspect of the project manager, right? And then perhaps the thing is to think, when that feels overwhelming, is to think, well, what else am I as a project manager? What are all the hats I wear? You know, when they talk about the Scrum Master role, we sometimes say, well, the Scrum Master is an educator. So, you know, a Scrum Master is like a teacher. A Scrum Master is a coach. A Scrum Master is a facilitator. Scrum Master is an impediment remover. So then we come up with metaphors where it's like a bulldozer. The Scrum Master can be like a bulldozer, or like your favorite teacher in school, or like a football coach, you know, driving you forward. So we come up with, we often just sort of describe these things naturally through these different metaphors. And sometimes the metaphor can be jarring. You know, I've known Scrum Masters who say, I feel like an administrative assistant. Right, well that's quite telling, isn't it? So why are you feeling that way? Well, all I do is set up meetings. Or then people have the impression that the Scrum Master's job is just to organize meetings and make people go to them. And so they're like administrative assistants. Well, that might be a very, very, very small part of it. But if your job becomes identified as that, you've got a problem. So the metaphor tells us in just 2 words rather than a long description or a long complaint. What's, you know, that something's not right. Let me say, how do you feel about your job? Well, I feel like a clerical assistant. We have a problem we need to then talk about, and we don't, you know, that's enough. Just that metaphor in itself tells us so much. So when you say you feel like a bookkeeper, to me, you say it's a necessary part of the job, and it might be to keep good records. But I wonder, with keeping good records, how much of the keeping good records is really necessary? Because very often when I've challenged people on why they write down what they write down, it does reveal some superfluousness sometimes. And so it's always good. Now, did I sign up to be a bookkeeper? Is that why I got this job? Was this job description, did it say bookkeeper in the job description? If it didn't, then you find yourself doing something you didn't really plan to do. And so it's worth investigating a little further. You might like it, I don't know. I mean, some people like that. Some people are bookkeepers and they love their job.
I don't prefer to be a bookkeeper, but honestly, generally you have to give the correct information about the project to the upper management or the sponsorship or other stakeholders as well. Yeah. That means that you have to keep in an accurate way of the project status.
Yeah. You see the language you're using there, Aitan, is that you say you have to do this, you being the project manager has to do this. I would challenge that. I would say it has to be done. Information has to be passed. Where does it come from? How much information needs to be relayed that way? What kind of information? What's the quality of the information? What is the necessary channel? Should it go through a project manager, or can it be more directly from the developer to the executive or to the customer? And so it just starts us asking questions, that's all. Because when I see bookkeeper, my response is, that doesn't sound like a useful job for a project manager. I can think of better things for a project manager to do than keeping books. So I'd want to go in and investigate that. And so it creates a doorway, right? The metaphor creates a doorway then to just go a bit closer.
Yeah, that is great. Doorway or gateway, okay.
A gateway, yeah, something like that, yeah. Yeah, they, the learner. What else have we got in here? There's a lot of stuff in here. So in the last 10 minutes of this, let's just do another quick breakout. This will be a 5-minute breakout, Alex, right? I'd like you to come up with so whatever metaphor you came up with, it might be the perfect metaphor for you. I would like you to come up with an aspirational metaphor for the job that you do. All right, what do I aspire to be in this role? So you might be the annoying relative who comes and lifts up the rug. But I don't think, that doesn't sound like an aspiration. It sounds like a necessary step. What's the aspiration in your job role? That would be interesting. What do you aspire to? Okay. And again, it doesn't have to be another human role. It can be something else. You know. Birds, animals, fishes, vegetables, maybe. I don't know. Inanimate objects, perhaps, but or abstract nouns, even. You know, just something that it isn't. So, literal 5 minutes this time, Alex. All right, and then we'll come back and just share those at the end, because it's a bit of a short session, isn't it? We're finishing at 7, Alex. Is that right?
About 7, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So let's do that. Let's dive off into rooms and just have that conversation.
That should be taking people into rooms now.
Yes, it seems faster, doesn't it? That time went by a bit quick, didn't it? I'm not sure what happened there. That bit delay in the middle there, it sort of like stumbled me. That's all right.
Breakout rooms.
Srikant put so many comments in the chat. I can't really keep up with him. He's always doing that.
He did. So I've just left us 3 in the chat now.
Right.
Which is good.
He put some really interesting stuff in there, and I'm trying to read it and keep up with what he's putting, and then also kind of hold the room together.
Quite a diverse group tonight. We've got people from all over. I saw people from Toronto, San Diego.
That's interesting, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Toronto, Srikanta's in Toronto. And there's a few people from Eastern Europe countries in there, isn't there?
There is, yeah. There is.
That's nice.
Good.
Yeah.
For some reason, as I say, I've missed it. So should we let them back in at 18:55?
Yeah. That's about 3 minutes, yeah.
Yeah.
Quite like that narrator metaphor for a business analyst.
Yeah.
Narrating your life.
Yeah, I'm just trying to think what gets thrown around in a recruitment office. The only way is up.
Yeah, you get those kind of things.
Yeah.
You might find I don't know, do you things like, do you get like grab the low-hanging fruit or value add?
Yeah. I use that one actually. That's interesting. I use that one.
Yeah.
Because when there's a job which is easier to fill,
yeah,
we will attack the lower hanging fruit. Yeah.
I bet you said this, I don't have the bandwidth.
Yeah, that's when somebody wants me to find them a developer. I say I don't have the bandwidth.
Yeah, take it offline. It's another one. Put it in the pipeline.
Yeah.
Run it up the flagpole. And how often have you been burning the candle at both ends, Alex? Have you done that?
To be honest, guys, in my younger days, a lot. I'm 37 now, and I literally burn the candle at one end now.
Good. But there is no candle, of course, so it's all metaphorical, isn't it? A double-headed candle or a single-headed candle.
Yeah, I wouldn't even know.
Or it is a way of us speaking in poetry, essentially, and when we come up with fresh metaphor, that's when people start taking notice of what we're saying. So when I teach storytelling, I teach that. I say, use metaphor when you're storytelling, but don't use trite metaphors. Use fresh metaphors that you've come up with in comparison, similes. So it was like, when I was going home in the storm, it was like someone was throwing gravel at my face. Right. Yeah. So that gives this picture, but it's not one and people go, oh. They sit up when they hear something unusual like that.
And that actually,
rather than saying it was raining like cats and dogs. We've heard that so many times. You want to do something else.
That actually helps towards individualism and making you a bit more unique as a person.
Yeah.
And people will go away and remember that and be like, oh yeah, that's the gravel guy.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it does. It makes
18:55. I'll let them back in.
Yeah, let them back in. Yeah.
That was a good point, Tobias. I like that.
Yeah.
They'll slowly let people back in, I think.
Yeah, it has a countdown, doesn't it?
But it seems to sort of do it as the countdown goes. It doesn't do it all at once at 0. I think it starts to let people in slowly because it also puts them into the breakout room slowly.
I think that's a bandwidth restriction, actually, because it goes via the server, doesn't it? I think that's all it is. It's the delay on that. No, normally you'll see everyone that will suddenly come back all at once.
Yeah, I have had that, but yeah, they're queuing out in the rain, hitting their faces like gravel.
Where are those people? How long have they got on the countdown? Did you put a 60 seconds?
2 seconds.
Huh?
2 seconds. There we go.
Yeah. So they're all at once. Bang,
yeah.
Bang, bang. Right. Running low on time. Let's just bang those into the chat window so we can see what you've come up, your aspirational metaphors. Let's see what they are. So again, it will be your job role. Gardener. So Milian is very Shakespearean, isn't it? What a great aspiration to shine across the organization. Chameleon, sand. So one of the things that Alex and I were talking about in the break, I teach storytelling, and a really important part of storytelling is the poetry of storytelling, and the poetry is in the metaphor. And so as when we tell stories, we don't just blandly, repeat word for word, sort of like what's happened. We embellish and we brighten it up, and we color it with words, and we color it with metaphors. When we tell stories, though, people get bored if we use old, worn-out, trite metaphors that they've heard before, because it doesn't go in. There's no poetry left in that. And so we have to kind of invent our own metaphors when we're making up things. And so we're trying to describe something. And by the way, there's similes and metaphors are pretty much the same thing. And I heard a nice description once that a simile is a metaphor with a scaffolding still on. Because when we use similes, we say this is like that. Okay, so X is likewise, not equal to. And it's a metaphor with the scaffolding still up, because you could drop the like and it would work. So they're essentially, a metaphor is a sort of an overriding category. But when we come up with metaphors, the one I just gave Alex off the top of my head, if you're walking home in the pounding rain, you can say the rain was so hard it was like gravel being thrown at my face, which is probably not something that you've heard before, or very often anyway, rather than it's raining cats and dogs, which you've heard maybe thousands of times before. And so you're trying to come up with a fresh way of getting your audience to experience what you've experienced. The rain it was that, so they're thinking subconsciously, gosh, it was that hard, it felt like stones hitting the person's face. And as Alex pointed out to me, he said, then people will remember you from that metaphor. They'll be like, oh, that's the gravel guy, after they've heard your story, right? So you stick in, but if you just use the run-of-the-mill metaphor, if you woke up in the morning in a bad temper, if you said I woke up this morning like a bear with a sore head, people might nod in familiarity, because we've all heard that one before, certainly in the UK. But if you came up with something fresh for that, I woke up this morning like a man who had just escaped from a lunatic asylum, or something. You just throw it out the top of my head. Not great, but it's different enough that people go, oh wow, that's some wake up there. Tell me more about that. And then what happened? Now you escaped the lunatic asylum, and what does that feel like now? Where are you now? And so you kind of create pictures, and you create conversation through the use of metaphor. So I really encourage it. I really encourage you to play around with your own aspirational metaphors, and look at where you are now. What does it feel like? When I'm doing this over and over again, this boring thing I really don't want to do, what does it make me feel like? It might make me feel like, I'm on a production line in a Victorian factory or something. That's your metaphor for doing the same job over and over. How do I get out of that? What do I do? What do I do differently? If I come up with a new metaphor, maybe I'll come up with a new way of working. So it invites us in. It invites us into poetry, essentially. That's what it does, and when we can live our lives in poetry, all kinds of possibilities open up that we couldn't have even imagined before. And I just want to shout out to that, Taruna's Princess and the Pea thing. I can't find it in the chat now. What can you say what it was, Taruna? Searching for the pea under the mattress. Yeah, an agile coach is like searching for the pea under the mattress. It's like, I don't know if you know that story. Many people do. It's about, the true princess who can sleep on 20 mattresses with a pea underneath and be uncomfortable, right? And so it's like, how do you get the perfect arrangement? So it conjures up. That's aspirational, actually. That's aspirational. All right. Well, thanks for being here. And it felt like it was a bit short and a bit of a trip up in the middle there, but it was all right. And good to see you all. Thanks for joining. See you around.
Tobias, thank you very much for that. As always, a very, very thought-provoking session, and highly interactive as well. Do apologise, everyone, for the slight hiccups with the breakout rooms, but forever learning, I will know for next time. Speaking of mental asylums or a lunatic asylum, try working in recruitment for 15 years. That is me every single morning. Just while I've got everyone, we've got slightly smaller numbers this evening, and it's been a very interactive session. I think people are very keen to get out and escape the lockdown restrictions. Does anybody have any questions for Tobias while you've got the opportunity to ask them. As usual, I would ask you to put them into the chat, but it's been an interactive session this evening. So if you have any questions, please, you have the floor.
What would you describe your role as, Tobias, if you were going to pick up a metaphor?
A few years ago, I came up with the metaphor of untangler, and I put it on my website. Actually, I was an untangler for a while, but I've used various things over the years. Janitor. When I was actually a Scrum Master in an organization, I described myself as a janitor. It was cleaning up the toxic waste and you know, getting rid of your garbage, essentially. Removing waste, right? If we remove waste, we're like janitors.
Did senior management ever shout over to you and ask you to genuinely remove rubbish, though, and get you confused for the janitor?
No, I never actually. I think I put these on Twitter and LinkedIn and things. I don't think but I had a job description when I was working at Yahoo. They gave us these job descriptions out of the HR bucket. You had to fit in one of the buckets, one of the categories, and I was project manager level 4 or something like that, which had no meaning to me, but it was the only category they could put me in. But but on the internal website, I found that you could actually change your job title to do what you want. And people put some interesting things up there, but mine was, I think it was human systems architect was the metaphor I used there, or the description I used. Not really thinking of whether it was a metaphor or not at the time. That's kind of what I felt I did. I architected this human systems rather than the software systems. So there's a few different things over the years. It changes, Taruna. Gardener, someone has likened Scrum Master to a gardener. I often think about that, the gardener metaphor. And one of my favorite ones for myself and for Scrum Master is the court jester, or the biblical prophet, you know, the Old Testament prophet. It's calling out the bullshit. In both cases, that's what they did. The court jester and the prophet, they call out the bullshit, and they call out people straying from the truth and the pathway, and calling them back to center. So lots of different ones, changes over the years. Yeah.
Any other questions?
One here. What do you think is the reason for some people to have so much problems finding a metaphor?
Did you find that for yourself, Gilberto, when you were in the breakout room, or you've noticed this with other people?
I noticed it with some colleagues, with some exercise.
Yeah, you know, I don't know. It's interesting. I was doing a session once, and I asked people to do that kind of clean language exercise around, you know, what they're describing their job. When I'm working at my best, I am like, and you fill in the blank. And she got quite angry about this, and she said she doesn't think metaphorically. She said, that's not how I work. That's not how I think. And I said, well, how do you work? And she said, I work like a soldier, marching forward and not being led astray by nonsense like this. And I said, okay, so when you're working at your best, you're like a soldier. And she kind of went, yeah. So she had a metaphor. She just didn't think of it that way, you know. And I think so. Most people do have something. So if you ask people to describe their job, don't say come up with a metaphor. Say, describe your job. What does it feel like? You'll find, you know, probably they'll throw quite a few metaphors out in there. Yeah, there was a critique I read in a book about metaphor from I can't remember, 100 years ago or so. This writer was complaining about the use of metaphor and how rubbish it was, and how people shouldn't be allowed to use metaphor in serious writing. And he was doing a serious critique, and he said, writing with metaphor and is like wading through a swamp of words where you don't know, you know, he came out with this string of metaphors basically about why people shouldn't use metaphors, and he didn't even realize that he did it. It was so funny. It was just crazy, you know, wading through a swamp of words, which is great. I mean, it describes it quite well, but it is a metaphor nonetheless. So we have them, Gilberto, I think all the time, you know, we find ourselves using these, and what it takes sometimes is a listener to just catch them. It's almost like they're these words that we throw out, they're sort of like insects, and you have to get the butterfly net and say, I got one, you know, you just threw out this metaphor. Here, we give it back to you. So I'll give it back to you with, you know, like the soldier thing. You know, you just, so you give the words back. You say, oh, so when you're working at your best, you are like a soldier. because those were her actual words. They weren't anything. I didn't impose that at all. So that's a technique you can use, is just to sort of ask them what it feels like, you know, what it looks like. What does it look like when you're working at your desk?
Thank you.
Sometimes people get, you know, when we start using words like come up with a metaphor, it creates resistance. You know, people this sort of soft skills thing, or you know, they've got some therapy thing, or they have a resistance to it, and so we just find other ways of asking. We all got
Any other
them.
questions, guys? Okay.
Well, yeah.
Thank you
Do a
very
bit more of that. Like I said, I teach a one-day storytelling workshop. We do a lot of work around metaphor in that, and there isn't one scheduled, but there could be if people get interested. So let me know.
Do reach out to Tobias, connect with him on LinkedIn. This session has been recorded, and you'll be able to skip my technical hiccups if you want to go over it again. I just want to say thank you very much to everyone for joining this week. We are back next week, 2 speakers next week. Laura Peakle and Andy Hiles are speaking next week, so be sure to tune into that. As I say, once again, thank you to everyone for joining, but a massive thank you to you, Tobias, for, again, another thought-provoking and highly interactive session. Everyone loves listening to you talk, so thank you very much. It was really great again tonight.
Thank you, everyone. It's great to be here.
Have a lovely evening, everyone, and I hope to see you all next week. If I don't, have a Merry Christmas.
Likewise.
Yeah.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Bye.